It's not the screams that haunt Blackwood Manor. It's the silence. A silence so profound, so absolute, it feels like a physical weight pressing down on your chest, stealing your breath, and whispering secrets only the dead should know. Blackwood Manor stands isolated on a windswept bluff, overlooking the jagged, unforgiving coastline of Voss, Oregon, its Gothic silhouette a stark skeletal finger against the perpetually gray sky. Built in 1888 by the reclusive shipping magnate Alistair Blackwood, the mansion was a monument to his vast, ill-gotten fortune and his obsessive esoteric studies. Rumors followed its construction, whispers of strange rituals in the cellars of servants, vanishing and of a pervasive unnatural stillness that clung to the very stones. The Blackwood family line ended abruptly in 1903 with the simultaneous unexplained deaths of Alistair and his only son, both found in their beds, seemingly untouched, yet utterly devoid of life. The official cause was cardiac arrest, but the local coroner, a man known for his unflappable demeanor, resigned immediately after muttering about a silence that ate souls. The manor was sealed abandoned and became a local legend, a place where sound went to die and where, if you listened closely enough, you could hear the absence of it. This story begins with Dr. Elias Thorne, a 42-year-old audiology specialist and parapsychologist, a man who chased echoes in the void. Elias wasn't interested in traditional ghosts. He sought the imprint of sound, the residual acoustic energy of traumatic events, believing that extreme emotional resonance could leave a quantifiable sonic footprint. Blackwood Manor, with its legendary sound-eating properties, and the Blackwood family's silent demise, was his ultimate horrifying case study. He'd pored over fragmented, heavily redacted police reports for 1903, hinting at bizarre, localized acoustic anomalies detected by early crude sound measuring devices and unverified anecdotes from terrified neighbors who claimed that on certain nights all ambient noise, wind waves, even their own heartbeats would vanish when they neared the manor. Elias believed Blackwood Manor's true horror lay not in what it contained, but in what it stole and what it truly wasn't. He never intended for his research to silence him. He certainly never intended for the manor itself to listen. But fragments of his journey, his terrifying descent into the soundless abyss, survived, captured on his specialized military-grade acoustic mapping drones, meticulously transcribed from his biofeedback suit's internal audio logs, and ultimately retrieved from a meticulously encrypted, partially melted data core, surgically implanted within his abandoned research vehicle, found weeks later miles from the manor's gates. The first definitive sign that something was irrevocably wrong didn't come from a spectral presence or a sudden chill in the damp, heavy air. It came from the air itself, or rather its utter defiance of acoustic principles. Elias had navigated the treacherous overgrown drive and the dense mist-shrouded grounds for hours, guided by his advanced topographical mapping and the increasingly erratic readings from his localized acoustic dampening sensors. He finally located Blackwood Manor, a sprawling, dilapidated complex of dark stone and crumbling timber, its windows like vacant eyes staring out at the turbulent ocean. The air hung thick, cold, and strangely devoid of the usual sounds of a healthy coastal environment. No crashing waves, no squawking gulls, no rustling leaves. Just a profound, suffocating stillness. He spoke into his field recorder, his voice low, professionally detached, though a subtle undertone of profound curiosity tinged with nascent unease was already present. November 15th, 10:30 a.m. Location Blackwood Manor, Oregon coast. Ambient noise. levels dropping precipitously within 50 meters of the main structure. Registers below typical environmental background. Approaches absolute 0 decibels. This is anomalous. Extreme acoustic absorption. Consistent with folklore. It's like walking into a sound vacuum. He paused, listening intently to the unsettling quiet that pressed in on his eardrums. It wasn't just quiet. It was an emptiness of sound, an unnerving void that seemed to actively consume all vibration, all noise. He moved deeper into the complex, his reinforced boots crunching unnaturally loud on the scattered gravel, the sound immediately swallowed by the oppressive silence. He found the main entrance to the manor, a massive ornate oak door, seemingly fused shut by time and rust. But then a faint rhythmic thump, thump, thump resonated from deep within the structure. A colossal slow beat, like a Baja, monstrous muffled heart. It wasn't the sound of settling ruins or distant machinery. It was too regular, too powerful, too impossibly alive and contained. It seemed to defy the very silence it was shrouded in. Hours passed under the oppressive sunless sky, perpetually veiled by the dense, low-hanging mist. The silence grew heavier, more pervasive, now accompanied by a subtle, almost inaudible pressure building behind his eardrums. He tried to dismiss it as a psychological effect of extreme sensory deprivation and prolonged acoustic paradox. But the sensation persisted, a dull ache that resonated deep within his skull, mirroring the rhythmic thump. His biometric suit registered erratic neural activity, localized spikes in his auditory cortex, often associated with processing sound even though there was no external sound to process. His portable acoustic mapping array, after hours of sweeping the vast silent ruins, finally locked on to a major undeniable anomaly. Not just zero ambient noise, but a consistent rhythmic subsonic frequency emanating from deep beneath the manor's foundation. This frequency was not geological. It was artificial, structured like a vast pulsating signal. And from its very core, the thump intensified to a palpable throb, along with a faint, luminous pulse captured by the array's exotic energy imaging. Not heat, but pure contained sound. A deep, impossible void black, like the absence of all light, but somehow terrifyingly intrinsically sentient. He whispered into his recorder again, his academic detachment fractured by awe and profound dread. The source sits deep, beneath the main hall, emitting a non-thermal luminous pulse. A deep organic, void black. The rhythmic beat, it's emanating directly from its core. The pressure, I feel it clearer now. It's like the manor is listening. A folklore mentioned a silence that ate souls. This is it. This is the source. This is what truly consumes Blackwood. Manor. A cold metallic taste filled his mouth, the taste of burgeoning existential dread. Driven by a dangerous, irresistible combination of scientific imperative, fueled by the sheer impossibility of his discovery, and a burgeoning icy fear that chilled him to the core, Elias located the precise epicenter of the pulsing void black anomaly. It was a section of the manor's collapsed cellar, where massive stone sections and rusted iron gates lay half buried in the damp earth. The air here was utterly still, heavy, with a profound earthy scent now tinged with a faint cloying sweetness. Like stale air mixed with something vaguely electrical, like burnt circuits. The void black light pulsed from within the very ground, a vast subterranean core, its rhythm a slow, deliberate beat that seemed to synchronize with his own. He noticed peculiar, intricate patterns within the exposed bedrock itself, not just natural, striations but swirling inclusions that resembled frozen sound waves, or perhaps trapped fragments of acoustic energy. He moved cautiously towards the source, his suit's lights cutting solitary beams through the oppressive gloom. The ground beneath him felt unnervingly soft, despite its solid appearance almost like walking on vast taut membranes. He could hear his own heartbeat unnaturally loud, echoing only within his own skull. But then other sensations began to intrude not from outside, but from within his own mind. Faint, fragmented memories, half-formed thoughts, almost whispers of impossible sounds, rising and falling with the void-black pulse. It was profoundly disconcerting, like his own auditory memory was being played back to him distorted and amplified, woven with other alien impressions. He reached the center of the anomaly, where the void-black glow was brightest. Here, amidst the wreckage of the cellar, something impossible was located. It wasn't just rock. It was a vast organic mass, pulsating softly half-buried beneath. The ground, its surface slick and vaguely membranous, radiating the void-black light. It was massive, stretching out of sight into the unseen depths. It had the distinct rhythm of the thump, thump, thump he'd felt. This was the source of the matter's endless pulse, a colossal organic receiver. And then just beside the pulsating mass, something horrifying came into focus. Not machinery, but a humanoid figure partially submerged within the glowing, shifting organic mass, as if caught mid-absorption. Its face, agonizingly clear despite the faint void-black glow, was contorted in a silent scream, its hands, outstretched fingers splayed. It was a man, likely one of the lost Blackwood servants, or perhaps even Alistair himself. His features were distinct, his expression raw terror. He was not merely a corpse, he was perfectly horrifyingly preserved, his essence suspended within the living tissue, a testament to an unspeakable fate. Elias stared horrified. This was beyond anything he had conceived. Not geological, not even acoustic, biological. He activated his bioscanner, pointing it at the organic mass of flesh. The readings were impossible. Not inert, not dead. There was persistent bioelectrical activity, faint, erratic, but undeniably present. The mass wasn't just preserving, it was sustaining. Against all logical judgment, compelled by a desperate need to understand, Elias reached out a gloved hand and gently placed it on the surprisingly warm, yielding surface of the organic mass encasing the man's arm. The moment his glove made contact, a searing jolt, not physical, but purely mental, shot through him. His vision blurred, filled with a blinding flash of void-black light. And then he was plunged into a torrent of raw, unfiltered sensation. Not words, but a rapid-fire sequence of images and emotions. The sudden crushing absence of sound, the agonizing sensation of his own voice being ripped from his throat, the horrifying realization that his very essence, his ability to be heard, was being consumed, absorbed by the entity around him. And then a single agonizing, voiceless scream, echoing in an absolute suffocating void of forgotten sounds. The vision lasted only a fraction of a second, but it felt like an eternity. Elias recoiled, tearing his hand away from the living mass, gasping for breath, his heart hammering against his ribs. The internal thump, thump, thump in his head intensified, now accompanied by fainter, more ethereal whimpers from within his own mind, like trapped whispers. This was not a passive entity. This was a living vacuum, and it held conscious agony. The mental jolt from touching the organic mass reverberated through Elias, leaving him gasping, disoriented, his mind reeling from the torrent of borrowed terror. He stumbled backward, his suit's internal systems screaming warnings about neurological overload. The chilling images of the man's final moments, the crushing silence, the horror of acoustic annihilation, the voiceless scream were burned into his retinas, echoing in his thoughts. The profound silence of Blackwood Manor seemed to press in harder. Now no longer just a lack of sound, but a conscious, palpable presence. The subtle thump, thump, thump from the ground intensified, transforming into a deep, resonant bass note that vibrated through the very ground beneath his feet, through the soles of his boots, up into his bones. It felt like a colossal living drum, beating out a vast, patient, predatory rhythm of oblivion. He spoke into his recorder, his voice hoarse-strained. November 15th, 2:15 p.m. Direct contact made with organic anomaly. Experienced immediate, intense psychological feedback. Shared subjective experience of acoustic negation. The entity, it captures sound. It preserves the absence of noise. A mass is not inert. It's a living filter, absorbing all vibration. My brainwave patterns are erratic. My mind, it feels stretched, muted. He paused, listening to the new, deeper bass note. The whimpers, it's still there. Faint, rhythmic, from within. He forced himself to calm, to analyze. The data streaming from his bioscanner pointed at the living mass was impossible. High concentrations of complex biological polymers interwoven with unknown fluid structures. And persistent high-level bioelectrical signatures far beyond typical cellular decay rates. These were not dead organisms. They were suspended alive in some terrifying, agonizing state of soundlessness. The entity was a living, sentient biological machine capable of absorbing and retaining the essence of life in its final panicked moments of utter quiet. As he moved carefully through the derelict cellar, avoiding direct contact with the most intensely pulsating patches of the organic mass, the bass note deepened, becoming a vast resonant symphony that seemed to emanate from every surface. The air itself began to shimmer, subtly distorting his vision. He started seeing fleeting ethereal images projected directly into his mind's eye, not memories of the man he touched, but other fragmented acoustic experiences. A child's laughter briefly appearing in the air around him, then twisting, stretching, fading into abstract light. A desperate woman running her hands across her mouth, her frantic cries, muffled by the encroaching silence, felt through his own skin as the manor swallowed her voice. The agonizing surrender of a massive ancient grandfather, clock its ticking slowly. Consumed by the living silence, its centuries of time compressed into a single overwhelming pulse of defeat and quietude. The living mass itself seemed to actively draw him in a seductive, irresistible pull emanating from its slick surface. It wasn't a physical suction, but a deep subconscious urge to step into its perfect stillness, to merge, to understand the profound emptiness, the agonizing peace it offered. His gaze kept returning to the horrifying beauty of the pulsating mass, its internal void black glow, promising ultimate truth, eternal tranquility in acoustic oblivion. He felt a profound sense of weariness, an aching desire to simply lie down on its yielding surface, to let the hum wash over him, to become part of its vast living memory of vanished sounds. His own will felt strangely weak, the boundaries of his self eroding under the constant mental assault. He activated his specialized acoustic dampening sensor, aiming it at the surface of the most vibrant patch of the organic mass. The readings were bizarre. The mass itself was generating a subtle internal acoustic anomaly, actively bending and absorbing sound waves, creating a localized event horizon for noise. This anomaly wasn't a byproduct of physics. It was consistent, regulated, almost like the internal process of a vast biological system. This was a living organism, a colossal predatory entity, slowly consuming the very concept of audible existence. And then he saw it. Streaks of deeper, more vibrant, void black within the mass, forming intricate pulsing patterns that shifted and flowed like vast, unseen neurological pathways. This mass was the entity's body, its flesh, its mind. He realized with a horrifying clarity that the legends were wrong. The manor wasn't just silent, it was consuming sound, and everything within it. The terrifying realization solidified in Elias's mind. The living organic mass was not merely a biological anomaly, but a vast predatory entity slowly consuming and assimilating the very fabric of sound and perception, transforming living vibration into its own monstrous conscious form. The constant low bass note vibrated through the air, growing more insistent, drawing him closer to the heart of the cellar. The mental echoes were no longer random fragments. They became more focused, more personal. Whispers not of the victims, but seemingly directed at him. You seek silence. We provide. Be absorbed. Be unheard. The words were formless, yet undeniably present in his thoughts, a seductive, invasive presence. He stumbled forward, driven by a desperate need to find evidence to prove this impossible horror. He saw it then, an active acoustic distortion zone. A section of a stone wall ahead seemed to ripple its surface, subtly absorbing light, then releasing it, defying visual stability. A rusted chain hanging from the ceiling briefly appeared to be vibrating violently, then snapped back into stillness, making no sound. Objects like scattered tools or debris would momentarily flicker out of existence and reappear a foot to the left, as if space itself was stuttering. It was happening in real time. The process was slow, agonizingly so, but inexorable. The solid reality slowly warped, becoming part of the living, pulsating organism. Further ahead, closer to the largest section of the organic mass, he saw something even more disturbing. A large wild owl, its form shimmering, half submerged in the glowing, shifting organic mass, its powerful wings still free, but its talons, torso, and head already solidified into translucent, void black flesh. Its eyes, wide with unspeakable agony, reflected the terrifying beauty of the mass's glow. The bass note resonated from it, and Elias felt a surge of raw, animalistic terror, a desperate, futile struggle erupting in his mind as he inadvertently brushed his gloved hand against a low-lying section of the living mass. The owl was not dead. It was trapped alive in its silent flesh tomb, experiencing eternal, disorienting agony. It's ongoing, he gasped into his recorder, his voice a raw whisper. The assimilation, it's not a past event. It's happening now. It's absorbing living organisms. And they're aware. They're conscious within the flesh. Their sounds are gone. He could feel a faint, almost imperceptible cold radiating from the very air. Around him, a subtle decrease in the ambient temperature that his suit registered, consistent with a vast biological process consuming energy. The sweet, cloying scent was stronger, almost suffocating. As he watched the horrifying transformation of the wall, a fine, almost invisible vapor began to rise from the surface of the living mass, shimmering with faint, void black motes. It was not mist, it was a diffusion of the entity's essence, a fine, almost gaseous form of the living tissue itself. It swirled around his suit, clinging to the visor, making his vision subtly blurry. He felt an unsettling, tingling sensation on his exposed skin around the cuffs of his gloves, and the unprotected areas of his neck. It was a subtle stickiness, a faint tackiness, like dried, invisible residue. He tried to wipe it away, but it seemed to cling stubbornly. Then, from the largest section of the living mass, the ground itself seemed to undulate. A wave rippled outwards from its colossal bulk, not of concrete, but of pulsating void-black flesh, smoothly extending, seeking. And then, from the surface of the mass, several translucent flexible tendrils, gleaming with internal void-black light, slowly emerged. They were too perfectly formed to be natural roots or muscle. They were too purposeful in their movement. They moved slowly, sinuously, like probing fingers extending towards the flickering objects, towards the absorbing owl, and terrifyingly towards him. The entity was not just consuming passively, it was reaching. The mental intrusions intensified now, accompanied by fragmented, distorted voices, not from the air, but from within his mind. Terrified, pleading whispers, joining the entity's pervasive bass note. Join the quiet forever. He felt his own legs heavy, his movements sluggish, as if the very essence of the entity was beginning to seep into his joints, slowing his reactions. Terrifying realization solidified the entity wasn't just physical. It was a vast conscious sound eater, a trap, laid for centuries, and he had stumbled into its very core. The translucent void-black tendrils, gleaming with internal light, extended from the vast organic mass, inching across the damp ground towards Elias. Their movement was slow, deliberate, utterly silent, yet filled with an insidious, unyielding purpose. The mental intrusions roared in his mind, a chorus of fragmented pleas, and the entity's vast, unfeeling command. Listen, consume, be assimilated. He could feel a subtle, unsettling cold radiating from the tendrils, a cold that promised not comfort, but absorption into oblivion. His own felt fragile, battered by the constant psychic assault. He stumbled backward, desperately trying to evade the slow, methodical reach of the tendrils. His suit's internal systems screamed warnings about high-frequency energy absorption. The air around him was now thick, with the fine, shimmering, void-black vapor clinging to his suit, his skin permeating his every breath. The sweet, cloying scent was overwhelming, almost intoxicating. He risked a glance down at his gloved hand. A faint, almost imperceptible absence of texture was beginning to form on the surface of his glove. A subtle matte film that looked disturbingly similar to the initial stages of sound absorption he had observed. He frantically tried to rub it off, but it clung, subtly hardening. It was already spreading. The entity was not just reaching for him, it was actively consuming him molecule by molecule, his very perception becoming the preliminary layer of its terrible, sound-devouring flesh. "It's on me," he gasped into his recorder, his voice raw with a terror that transcended scientific curiosity. "The void-black vapor, it's infesting. I'm changing. My voice, it feels gone." He tried to speak louder, but only a faint, raspy whisper emerged, quickly swallowed by the oppressive silence. The massive organic mass from which the tendrils emanated began to pulse with a renewed, brighter, void-black light. The rhythmic thump-thump-thump intensified, rising in pitch, becoming a low, echoing hum like a vast, empty chamber filling his head. The mental intrusions were no longer whispers, but loud, horrifying echoes of agonizing screams, thousands of trapped minds crying out in an unspeakable chorus of terror and eternal consciousness. This was the raw, unfiltered song of Blackwood Manor, composed of the final moments of all it had consumed, eternally cycling in acoustic oblivion. Elias knew he couldn't fight it physically. The tendrils were slowly but surely gaining on him, their fleshy tips almost touching his boots. The realization that he was facing a vast sentient predatory consciousness, one that consumed life and processed sound, hammered into his mind with brutal clarity. He was just another lost echo for its endless void, another vibration consumed by its terrifying living silence. His eyes darted around the crumbling cellar desperate. His gaze fell upon his autonomous drone lying discarded near the edge of the cellar, having crashed earlier due to the intense energy interference. Its outer shell was already partially coated in the thin, void black vapor, but its internal recording systems designed to be hardened against extreme environments might still be functional. If he could reach it, if he could transfer his final horrifying data, his last observations, before he became completely assimilated. It was a desperate, illogical hope. He lunged towards the drone, forcing his stiffening limbs to move. The void black tendrils, sensing his movement, accelerated their fleshy tips, striking the ground just inches behind his feet. The echoing hum of the manor intensified to a piercing whine, causing agonizing pain in his skull. The mental screams of the trapped souls became a deafening chorus, drowning out his own thoughts, pulling him towards the edge of madness. He reached the drone, his stiff fingers fumbling with the data port. An absence of texture on his gloved hand was visibly thicker, now his movements becoming slow, deliberate, almost petrified. He slammed his suit's data cable into the drone's port, initiating an emergency upload. The drone's small indicator light flickered, green then blue, then, with a final desperate surge, glowing a steady void black, mirroring the light that consumed the matter. Data was transferring, his knowledge, his warnings. But the tendrils were upon him. They wrapped around his legs, his arms subtle at first, then firm, pulling him gently, inexorably towards the vast organic mass of the sound-eating manor. He could feel the void black film spreading rapidly across his entire suit over his faceplate, slowly obscuring his vision, turning the world into a single blinding, shifting haze of impossible silence. The pervasive echoing hum became a part of him, vibrating through every cell. The mental screams of the trapped souls were no longer external. They were his screams merging with the chorus. His final thought, as the void black flesh fully encased, his faceplate, his eyes wide, and staring, his body frozen mid-struggle, was not of fear, but a horrifying, agonizing clarity. He was Blackwood Manor now, and he remembered everything. And he was the silence.